Welcome to the Love of the Star podcast. I'm Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105 through the Fan in Dallas, joined as always by former Super Bowl winning NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation, 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday on 105 through the Fan in Dallas. He is also the pre- and post-game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network, and he's also just a Texas Rangers fan who's beside himself, an LSU Tigers fan who's beside himself. It's been a tough couple weeks for you there, Brian, but you've got NFL football on the horizon, so maybe that'll remove some of the pain of LSU losing to Florida State and the Texas Rangers bullpen just not being any good.
No, hey, congratulations. I know I got several people out there I know that are Florida State fans, and the biggest one I think is John Machota, who is with the Athletic. And matter of fact, it was kind of like a presidential election when you get beat, by the opponent, and you send them the call or you text. And I sent Johnny a text last night with like 8 minutes to go in the game, and I go, congratulations, the better team won, and he said thanks. So it was kind of like really quick, but yeah, really unfortunate for my Tigers. And there's a lot of love for that school, a lot of love for the program and what they did for me. It hurts me to see them go out and play as poorly as they did at times. They really had no answer for Florida State. I'm looking forward to when we get to the draft show coming up, when we start to do that, work on the draft, to the quality of players there at Florida State. They did a great job with the transfer portal, but congratulations to Florida State. Congratulations to John Machota. And yes, it is game week as far as Dallas Cowboys go. So very exciting about that.
Yeah, and congratulations, obviously, to Coach Prime and Colorado with the big upset over the weekend. Man, I'm and this is, we've got plenty of time for the draft show. We're going to do Cowboys, man. But I will say, obviously, Deion Sanders.
Be careful, Bobby. There's people right now that are mad at us for even taking time away from Cowboy discussion.
The Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah,
I knew he was a good player, and I knew he was a bigger recruit.
Right.
But, just talk to some folks. It's like, no, that's a guy who, like, his trajectory could take him to the NFL. That kid doesn't sweat, man. He stands in there. He's calm. I'm really excited to watch him and see what happens there.
Yeah, very poised the way he plays. I even tweeted about this, the lateral agility, the ability to move, to keep his eyes down the field as things kind of fall apart around him. Colorado did a great job of, and TCU, much like it was very similar to like watching LSU. They didn't cover well enough. They didn't tackle. There was no pressure. But, the opportunities that Sanders had, the receivers, the skill guys, great job. They ran the football, had a great game plan, nice balance. I think they slowed the game down at the end, knowing that their defense was in a little bit of trouble. And, you started seeing a little bit more of the runs and stuff. I'd give anything to have a screen pass to go as long as they did. They had a couple of them that looked like they throw into their backs that worked out pretty well. But congratulations to Colorado, and congratulations to everybody out there whose college team or their favorite team won this weekend. It is week one. We'll see what happens in week two. Usually there's some kind of a bounce back. Usually they're, hopefully you don't go 0-2, but Colorado clearly is a team that's got national interest now, and they've got a big game against Nebraska coming up. But I tell you what, you're right about Sanders. Fun to watch, really fun to watch. And I'm sad I missed him playing at Jackson State. Maybe I didn't get to see enough Jackson State games, but the talent clearly is there.
Absolutely. And, when you talk about national interest and talent and big aspirations, it sounds a lot like the Dallas Cowboys, who, of course, it is week one. They get the New York Giants on Sunday Night Football to kick off the season. It feels like every other year it's the Cowboys and the Giants on Sunday Night Football. That's the way the NFL likes to schedule it. That's the approach that we take. We'll touch on some stuff next segment where we just kind of go over three questions that I've got for Jerry Jones.
You guys have him on Tuesday morning, right?
We've got him on 105 through the Fan. So there's three questions that I'm basically going to ask, versions of them that I'm going to ask to Jerry that I want us to kick around here. And so we'll kick around those a little bit next segment. But just kicking things off here as we enter the 2023 season, Brian, obviously changes with the offensive coaching staff. Right. We got the news this week, or at the end of last week, that Terence Steele got his contract done I was very surprised, honestly, that it got done. I thought they were going to let him play out on the tender, and I thought that was going to be a mistake. He ultimately, I know, I went back and listened to when we talked about this. We had said right around probably 18 million a year, right around 50 million in guaranteed. What does he get? He gets 17.3 annually and 50 million guaranteed. You can kind of,
I'm not going to take any credit for that, Bobby. I'll give you full credit because I am terrible with these contracts and numbers. Thank God that the cap folks are as talented as they are. Yeah.
As complicated as the negotiations can sometimes be, it does feel like it ultimately settles right around where we thought it did. So,
yeah.
Your thoughts just initially on getting Terence Steele done, locking him in, and how important that is, because I know there was a lot of discussion that, hey, look, Tyler Smith is the only guy guaranteed to be here on your offensive line through the end of this season. That was some of the talk in camp. Now you've at least maybe bought an extra year with Zach Martin. You've locked in Terence Steele. They're starting to get some stability for their offensive line into the future.
Well, nothing but credit to Terence Steele and nothing but credit to Joe Philbin, who's no longer here, that worked with him. And Joe all along talked about how the kid would come in, first in, last to go, ask questions, worked extremely hard, had a chance to visit with some folks over there about him and what he went through with his injury, how diligent he was coming in every single day, working very hard, not allowing anything to get him down, just stayed super positive throughout. And I'm one of these people, and I know if you follow me for a long time, I was super critical of this kid, way overcritical of this kid as a player. And there were times where, I felt like, oh, well, he can't do this and can't do that. Well, there's still things that he can't do. It's just that he does a lot more good things than he does bad things. And him and Zach Martin together make a very nice pair on that right side when it comes to running the football. It's very clear when you watch the Cowboys run the ball when he was out of the lineup, it wasn't the same. His ability, his athletic ability, the way he works combo blocks, the way he works the edge, the way he gets out on the crack toss, all those things are factoring into him as a really a solid right tackle. There's some things that he gives up a little bit power-wise, but you're always going to get fight. You're always going to get the finish, and that's the positive things about him. And congratulations to him for getting the extension, and congratulations to Adam Pacifica and Todd Williams and those guys, Stephen Jones, that work the cap. What we're learning about this, though, is if you're willing to meet them, and I'm talking about the cap guys, if you're willing to meet them and not try and reset the market, it appears you're getting things done. If you look at the last couple, this is not a deal that reset the market by any means. Diggs deal didn't reset the market. So if you're willing to play in a ball game where you're not going to be the highest paid guy, there's a good chance you're going to get something done. It's showing up that way. They are more than willing to work with you, but as long as you're trying to reset the market, then that puts them into a bad spot. But if you're willing to be the fourth or fifth highest paid guy at the position, that's right in their wheelhouse right now. And so maybe we'll see some others get done. But again, good job by the front office getting it done. Good job by Steele and his group getting it done and negotiating on their end. I think it's a very fair deal for everybody all around.
Yeah, and we talk about the stability of the offensive line moving forward. They've got, Zach Martin locked in hopefully for this year and next year. They've got Terence Steele now on this 5-year deal. Tyler Smith is on his rookie deal. They have the 5th-year option on him. So there's some stability there that you can build with. Nobody knows about left tackle. I mean, that may be Tyler Smith's job eventually. But the other question here on the interior, Brian, for me is Tyler Biadasz, who made the Pro Bowl last season, but was obviously an alternate. I don't know that he had like a Pro Bowl season, but he was a good player for them last year. And we haven't heard a lot of conversation about him being involved in some of these contract extensions or trying to lock something up long-term. Would Biadasz be a guy that you'd be interested in, kicking around an extension, conversation with, or do you think, hey, let's play this out, but ultimately I think I can go find somebody who can do this a little better?
Interesting question, because I'm hearing whispers and whispers meaning that this might be a pretty good group of centers in the college draft coming up. So I think I'm going to play this in a way that I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to wait and see with him. I know there's a lot of people out there that are saying, hey, Brian, if something happens to him, this team is, not in a very good spot. And, that very well could be true. Very well could be true. But I think there's some priorities I have right now. But if it's a deal that is he comes to the front office and says, hey, listen, I'm willing to do this number of years for this amount of money right now to get this thing done and cleared up, I'd sure listen. But I don't think I'm going out of my way right now to make this happen unless he comes forward with it. Because again, I'm hearing that it's a pretty good group of centers that we might be dealing with, and maybe you could be fortunate to get that guy like you did, that Travis Frederick, where he comes in and just totally solidifies your front with the way that he's able to play.
Yeah, and Biotish, I mean, I don't think anybody would argue he has been a resounding success as a 4th-round pick.
Done a nice job, yeah.
One of the Terence Steele, obviously an undrafted free agent, but one of the few day 3 offensive linemen that's really hit for the Cowboys. The Cowboys have always had success drafting offensive linemen, but it's typically been they've used high capital on them. It's not frequently that you hit on guys on day 3 with offensive line picks. So Biotish, definitely a success story. If nothing gets done and you do want to draft somebody, do you think now that Diggs has been locked in and Steele have been locked in, I think those were the most obvious candidates for potential tags. Do you think Biotish could be the biggest tag candidate we're talking about here in 4 or 5 months heading into the offseason?
I'm thinking about that because I'm thinking about who else you're having to deal with. Is he the only guy? I mean, I was hopeful I wasn't going to leave somebody out.
Big ones we had been talking about were Steele and Diggs. Let me look here because I know
I don't want to sit there and say, yeah, he's a tag candidate, and next thing you know, there's like, well, you're not thinking about somebody else on defense or
So you've got Pollard will be a free agent again.
Okay.
I'm trying to see if this Spotrac says it, but I'm not sure that's right. I guess Tyron Smith is going to be a free agent at the end of this year too. It's just a little difficult with the void years they have on there to tell that. But your top candidates would be Tyron Smith, Tony Pollard, Stephon Gilmore, J-Ron Kearse. These would be the guys that are probably in competition along with Biotish.
Man, Kearse is so important to what you're trying to do. And so, I'm glad I didn't forget him. I just didn't know who all was. But, and hey, how much would it be for Gilmore too would be another one too. That's that tag, what is that thing? Probably $18-19 million. Is that kind of where we're at right now on the
So this past year, because it's a little interesting the way it works. So the offensive lineman, even though Biotish is a center, it's averaged out over offensive line. It does not specify which offensive lineman. So the number is really big this past year. The franchise tag was $18.2 million on offensive line. For corner, it's 18.1.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's about the same figure.
And our safety is not as much either, right? And our safety way down.
The safety figure would be 14 million, or it was this past year.
I'm kind of looking at that direction right now. But if the corner tag, again, depending on how well Gilmore plays or where you feel like, that might help you. I'm sure, but there's options. There's options there. I just kind of feel like I think with Kearse, I know how important he is, but damn, Biotish is too. If something happens to him, I thought with Biotish, having to deal with that ankle injury that he suffered in training camp.
Last year.
Yeah, I mean,
it was a big deal at the end of last year, and it was a big deal during camp.
Yeah, it was. It clearly was. So you kind of got me on the fence on that one, Bobby, and I hate to be on the fence. I don't want to be on the fence about that.
That's why we ask these tough questions.
There might be, you got more safeties. I mean, it might be a thing, but do you have a safety that means as much to you as what Kearse means?
Yeah, not just what he does on the field, but who he is as a leader and what he brings to that locker room.
And speaking of safeties, I was talking to some folks over in the organization, and I think that we got this from McCarthy, though, earlier. But this morning I was talking with some guys that Donovan Wilson, the plan is to try and get him ready for week one. It was a little bit slow with the calf injury that he was dealing with, and that was putting him behind. But the plan is to have him get ready to practice. So they feel like that he's pretty close. Let's see if he can get there by Sunday.
Dan Quinn, when we got a chance to interview Dan Quinn on Sean and RJ on 105 through the Fan during training camp, he had actually singled out Donovan Wilson as one of the guys that he said, yeah, look, when we talk to guys about, playing with effort and playing with a certain attitude and physicality, the first guy I highlight is number 6. That's why I tell people, if you're in the secondary, learn from this guy. Like if you're in the back 7, you want to learn from this guy and how to play physical football and how to, play football our way. And so he definitely is a guy that they think very highly of. You're listening to the Love the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, I've got these 3 questions that I want us to kick around here. We've got variations of these that we're going to kick around with Jerry Jones on Tuesday morning when he joins us on 105 through the Fan for his weekly radio show, his radio hit, 8:30 every Tuesday on 105 through the Fan. And I've got a few questions here, and we're going to build off of something we just discussed pretty heavily during that last segment, Brian. But this is the first one, is that look at the money that this team has spent in the last month or so. They gave a new deal to Malik Hooker. They, reworked Zach Martin's deal. They give extensions to Trayvon Diggs and Terence Steele. And then you consider the fact that they've given up, just in the last 6 months, they have traded away a 4th, a 5th, and a 6th round pick in next year's draft. When you see the investment that they're making in their guys and you see the capital that they're moving, and it's not high draft capital, but they're getting rid of their day 3 picks, which is not like them to just empty those.
Nope.
Do you think that they're signaling with their actions how much they truly believe this is a Super Bowl contending football team?
I believe there is a form of, and it's not the word desperation, but there's a form of this, I'm thinking it's maybe anxious is the wrong word, but sense of trying to hey, it's kind of now or never kind of a thing. And maybe that's a bad analogy of it as well, because I kind of feel like that Jerry Jones, is getting to the point in time where he's looking at his football team and he sees what's happening in the NFC. He sees Aaron Rodgers going by the wayside. He has to feel like he has one of the top 3 quarterbacks in an NFC. It's a look of, I've got to do this now. I've got to find a way to, because we're not guaranteed tomorrow, and I'm not trying to sound morbid or sick or anything like that about Jerry Jones, but the older you get, the more you become like, we've got to do this now. We've got to figure this out. And I like to believe that Mike McCarthy would feel that way too. We've got to do this now. Because nobody's talking about a contract extension for me right now. Everybody's talking about me being one of the first guys fired. Everybody's talking about after the season that I'm going to be gone. And so I think there becomes that sense of that you have to, play this like, hey, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And I think they're doing it because of Jerry's mandate. But I also think they're doing it because they feel like these are really good opportunities to help their team. To go out and get Brandon Cooks, to go out and get Gilmore, to go out and use a pick to go get Trey Lance. Those are moves where you try and help your football team, your roster, in case something happens. You've got these quality of players, and to move draft picks to do that, that's just smart in my opinion. And they draft very well. You mentioned it. These guys do not. I mean, for them to give up picks, that's a big undertaking for them.
There's a great note this week. I don't know if you saw it, Brian. Sorry to interrupt. I think this is absolutely relevant to what you just said there. When we talk about them using their draft picks and the fact that they're willing to kind of not give those away, but they're willing to use those, in trade right now. I think that this was a great note from Jason Fitzgerald of Over the Cap last week. He said the Cowboys currently lead the NFL with being responsible for starting the career of 82 players currently in the league. Ravens are second with 77. At the bottom, you've got the Panthers with just 39. So, I mean, the Cowboys, that's how good they've been at finding talent. Even when it doesn't work out here, they're finding guys that sustain in the league. They're responsible for more than double the players, like more than double the amount of players that they started their career than the Carolina Panthers. And I think that speaks to why the Panthers are near the top of the draft. The Cowboys are generally at the back, but they're definitely showing a willingness to really go in. And you brought up a good point when you said you don't want to make it sound like now or never.
It's a sense of urgency, right?
Yeah. And
it's that sense of urgency is what it really is.
I think there's been a sense of urgency, and this is a continuation of it, each of the last 4 years. For Jerry to make the move to move on from Jason Garrett, I think he felt I gotta make something happen here. This team's close. I gotta make something happen. Get near the end of the career here. That was part of it, and then the way he fought. Nobody fought harder in league circles to play the COVID year than Jerry.
I've said that a bunch on various platforms. That you're absolutely right. When you get to where you're late 70s, 80s, Jerry knows he doesn't have that many campaigns left. That we're starting to see. His friend Al Davis. We got reminded of that when the Raiders played. Against the Cowboys in the preseason, listen to Mark Davis talk, and we learned Jerry. Al Davis was like his mentor, and I could say we're not guaranteed tomorrow, and Jerry knows that, and so it doesn't matter how many billions of dollars you had, though you have to try and find a way to operate thinking about today and not tomorrow. And I think that's what the Cowboys have done. The sense of urgency from Jerry, I think that sense of urgency has filtered down through Steven, through Will, through Mike McCarthy, through the coaches, and through the players. Yeah. I think look what Dak Prescott said about it.
Super Bowl or bust.
Super Bowl or bust. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, next question here. Brian Burns and Nick Bosa. Brian Burns there in Carolina. Nick Bosa with the 49ers. Both these guys, really fighting for their new contract right now. Bosa has been absent all of camp. Brian Burns is not practicing right now. There's some question about whether he's even going to play in this first game. How closely should the Cowboys, and in your experience when you were working in NFL front offices, how closely
about Chris Jones too?
Well, Chris Jones too. I'm just thinking more edge specific for
Sure.
Micah.
Sure.
How closely do you think the Cowboys try and monitor?
Oh, I see what you're doing. Okay. Yeah.
Monitor from afar and just go, how is this going to impact us? Because Jerry very clearly has his mind on Micah's next contract, and he's not even eligible for it till next spring. He's referenced it several times. How much attention do you think the Cowboys are giving right now to these Brian Burns, Nick Bosa situations, and how this might affect the way they have to negotiate with Micah next spring?
Yeah, the opportunity at training camp ran across, again, several people when you bring up Micah. And the question I ask is edge or linebacker? And their answer is, it is what it is. It doesn't matter. It just, you could tell me, oh, we're gonna try and sign him as an edge, or we're gonna try and sign him as a linebacker. It honestly, they know it's going to be a negotiation. It's going to be one of the higher paid defensive players in the league history, probably too. So I don't think it's, oh, look at Bosa and see where we're at. Oh, I don't look at Burns and see where they're at. They're going to get a number, and it's going to be a big number. And they know that's the possibility. They know that. Now, I wonder, I'm trying to think of ways that, like, how would you do this? And maybe you're going to get a Dak extension or, some way, somehow, some form.
$59 million cap number next year. That's got to come down.
Yeah. And I wonder, there's a side of me that, do you say you let it ride for this year? Do you just let it ride for next year?
You can let it ride for this year. It'd be really tight if you let it ride for next year. This year you could get away with it. Next year you'd have to, I think, address that pretty quickly.
You know what though? That's, as important as Dak Prescott is to you, Micah Parsons is just, I shouldn't say just as important because quarterback play, but you look at what Micah does, and he's one of the top 3 defensive players in the league, right? Yep. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
So I think that there's this weird side of me, and I don't know how it's going to work, that you say, you know what, we're going to let this Dak thing ride, and we're going to figure it out, and then all of a sudden it's, what do you do with Trey Lance?
Yeah.
And do you pay your quarterback $50-something million, or do you try and get an extension or what? I know it's possible, but it's not improbable either though, right? That
they would roll with Lance.
Yeah, and I'm saying that, and I'm not trying to slam Dak. I'm just telling you.
Totally get it.
I'm just telling you that, and I've said this so much, and I'm sorry I repeat myself way too much. I'm an old man, and that's what I do. But this general manager is not going to fire himself. He is going to hand it off to his son, and his son's going to become the general manager. And the Joneses aren't going anywhere. They're just not. And they're going to run their team how they want to run their team. So it's not super, super, super important for them, to it's important to have a quarterback, but on their terms, right?
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
That like most general managers, if you don't have a quarterback, you're going to get fired. We never found a quarterback in 3 years. With the Cowboys when I was working under the Dave Campo administration. Parcells came in, Tony Romo fell into our lap, 5th round grade, and next thing you know. But to me, Jerry and Steven and Will, if they build the team the right way, and they have a quarterback that they can work with, that they don't have to pay $60 million to, then they could pay everybody else. That's the whole plan is to try and find ways to be maximized not having a $50 million a year quarterback. And there's just a side of me that just is very, I wonder if they're kind of setting things up with some of their moves in order to make themselves more flexible for potential keeping Lamb, keeping Parsons, signing guys to longer term deals without having to pay a quarterback.
Yeah, I think that.
And I'm not trying to kill Dak. I'm not. I'm just saying this is a team when your job is not on the line, you could do a lot of things. There's no pressure having to pay a quarterback.
Yeah, the pressure would probably come from just what we've talked about here, is that Jerry feeling the sense of urgency to do something soon.
And they'll see what happens this year. They'll see what happens this year.
So
with
I would say it's not impossible. That's a scenario I think is within the realm of possibility to play. I do think it's improbable. I think Dak is probably the quarterback here for the next 5 years. But it's certainly not impossible. And if things break a certain way, then it absolutely could change their perspective on things. And that's where we go with this last question here, Brian. Kellen Moore had a lot of success. I know there were a lot of critics of Kellen Moore, but just
they had success. They had success.
Speaking, they were one of the better offenses in the NFL over the last 4 years. Just statistically, it bears out that way. Brian Schottenheimer, new offensive coordinator. Mike McCarthy, new play caller. What does this offense, given the success that Kellen Moore had, what does this offense need to do? What do we need to see from the offense in 2023 for you to be able to turn the change in play caller a successful one? Is it just replicating Kellen Moore, or do you have to go above and beyond? What does it have to look like?
Is that a question you're going to ask Jerry?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good question. I think for it to be successful is I want to come out of 2023 with the thought that they use their personnel like the defense uses their personnel.
It's a great way to put it.
That's what I want. I'm not asking for touchdowns or gaudy rush numbers. I want to see them have success using Brandon Cooks, using Deuce Vaughn, using Tony Pollard, using CeeDee Lamb, using Dak Prescott, using Luke Schoonmaker.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see. Like I said, this offense, if it uses their players like the defensive coaches use theirs, because this is a top 5 defense, and this offense, at times it's been one of the best scoring offenses in the league. But please, 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 Mike McCarthy and offensive staff, use your players to your advantage. And I think if they do that, I think everything will take care of itself.
Yeah, I think the standard for me to say this is a success is kind of like you say, they're not specific numbers.
No.
Because the numbers were great. I guess I'd say that
they were great and didn't win playoff games.
It's along the lines of what you just said, but I want to feel like you made somebody more than what they were. Like I want the Laurent Robinson stories, and those, a lot of times CeeDee Lamb's been great, but CeeDee Lamb's been about what you project him to be.
Yeah.
You generally, I think you're seeing guys perform. I want the J-Ron Kerr story on the offensive side of the ball. And it doesn't necessarily have to be this guy specifically, but I want Chuma Edoga has to step in for 6 games, and Chuma Edoga plays really, really well.
Yeah.
That's what I want. I want, and maybe that comes in the form of Jalen Tolbert. Jalen Tolbert shows something more this year. Maybe it comes in the form of, you see Jake Ferguson break out, or you see Peyton Hendershot really figure things out. Or that, Malik Davis comes into his own a little bit more, just varying things. And Malik Davis, obviously on the practice squad, but those are the kinds of levels that I think that we're looking at here. So I think that's a great answer. And I'll be interested to see what Jerry has to say on it. You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is now time for our Dean Julia Love of the Star mailbag. We're going to have a couple of these this week. First question here from Shelby.
Can I say something real quick, though?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, hey, folks, thanks so much for your questions. I'm sorry we don't get to all of them, but I do. And I always ask. We always ask. And you guys have not let us down. And I know we only have so much time, but I'm going to do a better job of trying to answer questions that we don't get to on Twitter. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to go back, and if you have a bunch of questions and we don't get to, we only usually get to 3 of them or so, but I'm going to try and get back to your question if we don't get to it. So, but
I'll make this promise. Whenever I run into Brian at the Star or anything else, I'll have my cell phone ready, and I'll turn it on. I'll just put it right in Brian's face, and I'll throw him one of your questions, and we'll get a quick 30-second answer out of it. We'll collect them eventually.
But no, I know Bobby does too. Really appreciate you guys hanging with us on that, because every week we ask, every week you deliver, and there's sometimes your questions don't get asked, and you're probably like, damn it, I'm not going to ask any more questions. But I'm going to either try and ask them like Bobby's talking about, or answer them on Twitter afterwards, if that helps.
So you can keep,
Yeah, we'll get to them.
We'll get to a few of them right now, though. First question here from Shelby George. He's saying, what are your thoughts on this week's matchup between Kayvon Thibodeau and Tyron Smith? Do you think Thibodeau can wreck the game plan? Obviously, I know you're going to dive more into the Giants film, but you're very familiar with Thibodeau, how he was at Oregon, how he's progressed. I will say that Thibodeau does feel like the type of player that could give Tyron in his current state some fits. Yeah. I absolutely think we're going to be talking about this as a big marquee matchup that's going to have a huge impact on this game.
It will. And, the thing that makes the Giants so interesting, Bobby, thanks for qualifying. Yeah, tomorrow starts my looking at Giants stuff. But the Giants are really good inside at defensive tackle.
Yes.
So, and then, in Wink Martindale, like he's blitzing right off the bus, so there's things you're going to have to deal with protection problems, crowd noise, things like that. The thing with Thibodeau is he started off pretty slow. He was kind of banged up a little bit and then really finished the year pretty strong for them. So, yeah, and you're absolutely right. The one thing that Thibodeau has is the ability to not only capture the corner, but he also has the ability to get down inside. And when you rush inside on Terence Smith, that seems to be the weakest part of his game right now, that he can't push off that left foot and get back inside quick enough. So, a big, we had some news about Tyler Smith today with some, as we taped this on Monday, with some hamstring tightness. Need to monitor that during the week, because could that turn into TJ Bass all of a sudden, tomorrow or on Wednesday when we have practice, we have to kind of see if Tyler Smith is out there practicing at left guard, because somebody like Tyler Smith could kind of clean up the mess if Tyron Smith gets beat to the inside. But the Giants are, like I said, they've got a good inside group. So there's going to be a lot of one-on-one matchups across that front line that are going to be difficult, and Thibodeau will be one of those.
It's interesting you mentioned that. Let's just tie things in here. At _ DCF4L says it's game day and Tyler Smith is ruled out as head coach of the Cowboys. Yeah. What's your offensive line lineup? Now, Brian, I think you just kind of said it there. You would personally go TJ Bass.
I go Bass. I
would go TJ Bass. I think there is a decent chance this organization would go Chuma Edoga.
Well, that's, and has Edoga played like he's been tackled the majority of the times, right?
He's been better when we've seen guard. I don't think he's been great. I don't think he's been great during training camp. I think for them, though, especially Mike Solari, I think they'd say, give me the veteran. Give me the guy
coaches, you're right, Bobby. Coaches, but if on the Brian Broaddus scale of who's played well at this point,
Bass has been better.
Bass is your sixth guy.
Yeah.
He honestly is your sixth best player on the offensive line, because you got your 5 starters and then you've got TJ Bass. So I would go Bass, just because I feel like in a game where you're having to deal with big, monstery type of defensive tackles, TJ Bass is kind of a belly-to-belly mauler, brawler, kind of a blocker. And it might bode well for you to play with a guy like that and just give it a go. I mean, we saw what putting Tyler Smith out there at left tackle, everybody was in panic mode. We saw what that was like last season. Kid did a great job. TJ Bass is shown me he's got a little mustard to his game.
Yeah, and next question here from Jen Ford. She says, what is your confidence level that the Cowboys will come ready to play for game 1 this year? Seems like they always start slow, likely due to starters not getting game reps in the preseason. I'm a fan of the bubble wrap approach, but hoping the players come out hungry. So, Brian, what is your just general philosophy on rest versus rust heading into the regular season? And yeah, we have seen occasionally the Cowboys come out a little flat. They did last year. And do you think that that's something they'll have to guard against in this first game with the Giants?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, but I also know this though, Bobby, and thanks for the question there, Jen. I feel like, though, that this training camp has been good for the offense for the fact that they've gone against this defense. Yeah. I think there were some practices during the week, full padded practices in Oxnard on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, with an off day looming, that they got stuff done. And then there were times like, okay, they had their approach where they played the 3 preseason games. They learned a lot about guys in those preseason games. And it wasn't the starters they learned about. They learned about TJ Bass. They learned about, Wanye Thomas. They learned about some guys along the way. And playing those young guys and getting them, 3 games of work, I think helps them for the backup aspect of it. But the thing that always scares me in the early season games, and I'll be interested to see how the weather plays, and it might be one of those nice evenings at the Meadowlands there, because you always worry about cramping in the early games. You always worry about these starters not playing at all in the preseason, but they're working out. They're working out and they're trying, but you always worry about the cramping. That's the one thing. We saw it in college football the other day, the games we watched, except for our receiver at Colorado who played 130 some odd plays. It seemed like
grief.
That was amazing.
He's a stud.
But to me, the thing that always scares me is the cramping aspect. But that's where the starters have not gotten game action. But the practice action, I think, has been really, really, really good. And so I'm hopeful that work against their own defense will help them, will propel them to get off to a good start.
I do. Obviously, things can change over the course of 5 days. The present forecast, Brian, for kickoff that night, it's 77 degrees with 73% humidity.
Oof.
And a 50% chance of scattered thunderstorms.
Ugh.
So we might have some. We might be playing some wet football.
Yeah, it might be some wet football. It might also be, like I said, that 77% humidity is not a good thing to deal with. At least you're not opening like it. They have Miami on the schedule, right? They have the Dolphins on the schedule where they're playing a game in Miami. At least they're not opening it like Buffalo did last year. Remember that thing that Buffalo had to endure early season. So, yeah, I think they're fortunate. We'll see. But I always do worry about the cramping. And, and we'll see if they get off to a good start. Mike's got to get a good start as a play caller, too. Get Dak going, get the running game going, stay ahead of the change, which is something we'll talk about quite a bit during the week.
Obviously, you're a guy who spent a lot of time in Green Bay, but absent the advantage that it was for your Packers at the time, I'm curious, would you have preferred your team, let's say you're from a warm weather client, the Cowboys, going on the road, would you have preferred your team playing in the rain or the snow?
Snow.
Snow is easier to play than rain?
Snow to me, because snow to me is like, when you're dealing with that, snow is cold, of course. I'll tell you the worst one. We played an NFC divisional game against the 49ers in a mix of rain and cold, which is a night. We handled it well. Team handled it well. But yeah, that's the tough one. Snow, at least where you're going. You can kind of deal with the footing is sometimes questionable, but throwing that wet ball in the rain is, for some guys is pretty difficult to do. Dak handles it, I think, pretty well. But yeah, give me the snow because you can kind of navigate that a little bit better than the rain. We've been in some games, like I said, when I was in Green Bay, we played the Bears on a Monday night in a monsoon. And, fortunate Brett Favre was a really good wet weather quarterback as well. So, it depends on your team, depends on your coach and his ability to call plays though too.
All right, so just before we wrap up here, we needed to carve out the last couple minutes here to acknowledge the passing of Gil Brandt, who really to this day his impact is still felt in the way NFL teams evaluate players, and was the director of player personnel for the Cowboys for 29 years. He was not
hell of a run.
First year. He was here the second year, I think is what it was. He didn't join right out of the first year, but an incredibly forward-thinking individual, and somebody who's, like I said, his impact still felt to this day in front offices around the around the league. Brian, just some of your thoughts, and then I want to share an interesting snippet I found from an article about 35 years ago talking about Gil Brandt. But some of your thoughts on Gil Brandt and his passing.
Well, I tell you what, man, Gil was one of a kind. Was a baby photographer before he got in the NFL. That was his job.
That was his gig.
Taking pictures of babies is what he was, and so he got on with the Cowboys. A tremendous a group that he worked with himself, Tex Schramm, Tom Landry, Hall of Famers themselves. As a season ticket holder, I know folks know this, for 20 some odd years, from 1972 till 1992, with my family, I didn't see much losing football. And he was responsible for a lot of the players that were brought in to the organization. One of my favorite stories about Gil was how he timed a player in an airport terminal. He measured off 40 yards. had a kid stand at one end, he stood at the other, got his clock, got the time, wrote it down, and went to his next school. And Gil is the type of guy that you love being around him. The stories were tremendous. How he and others dealt with before the merger, with the NFL and the AFL, how they were hiding players, drafting players, signing players. It was just a totally different way of operating. But I'll tell you what, Gil was one of those guys that, and you talk about work a trade, Gil could fleece anybody. He had this ability to make his players that he was trying to trade you sound like that they were all Hall of Famers. In turn, you were getting the opportunity to draft Tony Dorsett, as you're trading away your guys to the Seattle Seahawks. So I'm going to miss Gil. He was always super, super nice to me. Always had a story for me, like I said. Always, provided me with a laugh or two along the way. So, he was one of the great ones, and he's one of the pillars of the National Football League and of the scouting community and of as what we know as the Combine today.
This is what we'll close with here. What I thought was a really cool snippet out of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. You remember Anthony Dickerson, the old SMU linebacker, played a couple years for the Cowboys, had a 10.5 sack season in 1983. Was considered up and coming. 84 season didn't go as well for him, and by the time 85 rolled around, he was ready to get out. Cowboys were ready to trade him. And all Gil Brandt was able to get for him was a 7th-round pick at the time. And this was the Fort Worth Star-Telegram recap of it, written by Gil Leberton. It said, "Down at Cowboy Inc., they're quietly cursing the beast that they themselves helped create. The next sound you read will be Gil Brandt's gnashing teeth. It's almost impossible to trade anyone nowadays. It's almost impossible. 2 things have happened," Brandt contends. People overvalue a draft choice, and second, our game's gotten so complex that if you try to trade someone once training camp starts, people are claiming that they'd be getting him too late to be of much value. And whose fault is this, Gil Leberton writes? Brandt made his name selling the NFL light beer at Dom Perignon prices. Dallas steadfastly built through the draft until after 5 Super Bowls, someone finally realized that the Cowboys must be doing something right. I don't feel partly responsible. No, Brandt says. I don't think we've ever cheated anybody. We've never put a gun to anybody's head, and we've never traded a lame horse. Gil Leberton writes, if God were listening, insert lightning bolts here. Still, the underground consensus is that the NFL wheeling and dealing calmed dramatically after the 1977 day when Brandt engineered the trade with Seattle that brought Tony Dorsett to the Cowboys.
There you go.
The best trade the Cowboys ever made, Brandt still says.
Yeah.
His other favorites, for the record, are the ones that enabled Dallas to draft Ed Too Tall Jones in 74, from Houston for Toady Smith and Billy Parks. Yeah. Randy White in 1975 from the Giants for Craig Morton. That's hardly a complete list either. Danny White, Tony Hill, Harvey Martin, Charlie Waters, Walt Garrison, and Robert Newhouse were drafted and picks obtained by trades. Those were the days. You can almost hear Brandt sigh from North Dallas. He just finished trading a Dallas Cowboys starting linebacker. He'd gotten a 7th-round pick in the 86 draft. People value a 4th-round pick like it's gold, Brandt mutters. Yep. So that was just a cool story to me, a cool snippet in history.
Can I tell one quick story about Gil? Because we're talking about alcohol.
Yeah.
There used to be when the Cowboys trained at Thousand Oaks out in California, Gil had a place in Montana, a home out in Montana before the Yellowstones and all that stuff out there. I mean, Gil was way ahead of the time for that. And the Cowboys had this thing called the 5 o'clock club where you used to, like, when you covered the team, Tex Schramm had a bar set up. So you can go in after practice and have drinks with Tex Schramm and talk football. They call it the 5 o'clock club. And matter of fact, when I went to work for Tex Schramm in NFL Europe over at Waterway Tower at Williams Square, real quick, he had a bar set up, and after work, we'd have to come in and we'd have to you mix yourself a drink, and you had to tell everybody what you did for the day. That was the way of getting everybody together. But Gil had a way of getting the alcohol from Dallas out to Thousand Oaks. But the truck would make a detour to Montana and drop off like half the alcohol and then make its way to Thousand Oaks. So Gil was able to he got the wine cellar stocked up, from from the Cowboys and stuff. But that was Gil, man. He was one of the best. He really, really was.
One of a kind.
For sure.
That does it for us here on the Love the Star podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. We're back in midseason form, so this is
here we go.
3 episodes a week. So this one's dropping on Tuesdays. We recorded on Monday. We'll record another Wednesday night. You'll have that one Thursday, and then we'll record again on Thursday night for you guys to have that ready for Friday as we preview the Giants and move forward. For Brian Broaddus, I'm Bobby Belt. We will talk to you guys again later. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.